Good afternoon. I'm Matthew Santirocco. I'm the Dean of the College of Arts and Science, and I'd like to welcome everyone to this memorial today. I must apologize for the shortage of seating. I have never seen a gathering such as this, and we certainly hadn't anticipated, and our rooms are rather tight right now. It's a great tribute to Seth to see so many people here, but on behalf of those who have to stand, I am sorry. And it might be possible, at least, for people to come a little closer to the front. And we're trying to bring in some extra folding chairs, so they'll be here shortly, and I hope that people will feel comfortable moving forward and maybe taking some of those seats. I'm here in several capacities today. As Dean of the College of Arts and Science, I'm here to pay tribute on behalf of our entire university community to a scholar, a teacher, and a colleague of extraordinary distinction, a towering intellectual presence on this campus and far beyond, Professor Seth Benardete. But I'm also a member of Seth's department, the Classics department, and I hope that you will allow me to speak in that personal capacity as well, because I'm here also as one of his colleagues, admirers, friends, and students. For all of us, whether or not we were actually fortunate enough to study with him in a class, are Seth's students. Our sympathy and our love go out especially to Seth's family, to his wife Jane, his son and his daughter, his brothers. We grieve for Seth and we grieve for ourselves, our own loss. But today I want to remind people that we're gathering together also to remember and to celebrate and to rejoice in a life of achievement and a continuing presence in our own lives. As a scholar and a teacher, Seth had the most extraordinary range. A subtle interpreter of literature, both poetry and prose. He was also a philosopher, an intellectual historian, and a peerless philologist. At a time of increasing specialization, Seth was a one-person classics department, not a generalist, but a specialist in, it seemed, almost everything. In his more than 35 years at this institution, there was hardly an author that he hadn't taught. Best known for his luminous writings on Greek tragedy, Plato, Herodotus, Homer, he was also a master Latinist, regularly teaching Ovid, Tacitus, Lucan, Apuleius, even at times Augustine and the Church Fathers. And he did so not only in those legendary 5-hour classes, 5 hours, by the way, without a break, and nobody wanting them to end, such was the force of his passion, but also in independent studies, one-on-one with students over the years. For he was as generous with his time as he was with his ideas and his passion. I first encountered Seth through his writings. I was a graduate student publishing at the time on Sophocles in philosophy and literature, and had to grapple, as we've all had to grapple, with that extraordinary series of articles on the Antigone in interpretation, a series, incidentally, that was republished as a volume a year or two ago. But it wasn't until a few more years that I actually met Seth in person. I was starting out in the profession as a young assistant professor at another institution, and we were both speaking at a conference that someone in this audience organized on the Roman poet Horace, whom I had studied for years and about whose odes I was about to publish a book. I still remember that evening vividly, how we read and discussed and argued for hours over the famous ode to Banduzia, Horace's Spring on his farm. With an almost visceral understanding, Seth honed in over and over again on that famous image, how the sacrificial animal, cut off pathetically before its prime, tinges the waters with its blood. I had never before penetrated through the Horatian artifice and the centuries of sanitizing and aestheticizing scholarship that surrounded it, to actually see the color of that blood, red turning to pink, to smell it, that iron odor, to feel its warm current, however feeble, course through the chill stream. Like the bloody water, the beauty of the poetry was tinged by pathos. Everyone had seen that far. But Seth insisted that we see also that the scene was compromised by sheer violence. It wasn't pretty. It was dangerous. I returned home, disturbed, and I reread the poem, and then I reread all the poems, and then I rethought, and then I rewrote. For I had discovered, and note what I say, such was the force of an encounter with Seth that it became my discovery. I had discovered that everywhere in Horace, just below the surface, violence lurks. That Augustan Rome, like its poetry, was a risky business. Seth was charming, but also challenging. Generous, but fiercely intellectually demanding. He paid serious people the compliment of taking them seriously. And any engagement with Seth, even if it was a quick chat in the hallway or a short note he dropped you with a reference, any engagement with Seth, in any such situation, one was at great risk of aporia or epiphany. There are many people here today, including some who have come from great distances, who are going to remember Seth. Before I introduce them, I'd like to close my remarks by quoting from two individuals who wanted to be here but cannot because they're far away. But they have sent us short remarks and they've asked that I read them, and I do so. First, from Chicago, Seth's own alma mater, his student from here at N.Y.U, Martha Nussbaum, writes, Seth Benardete was the first person I ever knew for whom the life of the mind was the most important thing in the world. The passion and urgency of his own relation to the Greeks was an inspiration, showing how rigorous mastery of language, encyclopedic knowledge of authors and texts, and a probing philosophical mind could all go together to create both mystery and beauty. It is very difficult to believe that he is gone, for it seems like only yesterday that I went to that closet-like little office for a tutorial in Sophocles and was introduced to the Philoctetes, a play that has been of central importance for me from then on. The first fact I remember Benardete telling me was that the Philoctetes is the only play in the tragic corpus in which the word gune, woman, does not occur. Nonetheless, women were far from marginal in his own picture of the discipline, and I owe him the greatest gratitude for giving me the courage to think that I could actually choose scholarship as a way of life. We have lost a unique, amazing person, but his writing and his teaching are very much alive. From farther afield, Germany, where he is away on leave this year, the chairman of our Department of Classics wrote in and asked me to share this with you. 18 January 2002. This morning I was looking over my notes on the Romans' use of exempla and found that I had at some point jotted down, quote, Lucan, toward the end of the Pharsalia, says that Alexander set a bad example, namely that the world could be ruled by one man. Check with SB on this, unquote. Checking with SB on nearly every topic that came to one's mind was a natural inclination. It was also a very wise thing to do, since he invariably had something of relevance and importance to contribute. Let me put it simply and briefly, Seth Benardete was one of the most brilliant persons I have ever had the privilege to know. He was brilliant in the range and depth of his knowledge, brilliant in his capacity to apply that knowledge. He was also immensely generous with what he knew and with his time. We're all sorry that more of the last was not fated to him. We're saddened, surely, for his sake, though in all honesty, I imagine that much of our sorrow was directed toward ourselves. We had best admit a healthy dose of egotism. But therein lies, I hope, a tribute to Seth. We have lost someone of great importance, someone who simply will not be replaced. Perhaps we can take comfort, however, by remembering Seth as an exemplum. Lucan found that Alexander was a bad example because he demonstrated that one man might rule the world. I would argue that Seth Benardete has provided us with a splendid example, for he showed, like Alexander, that one man could rule the ancient world, though in Seth's case, the hegemony was intellectual. Michele Lowrie, Associate Professor and Acting Chair of Classics at New York University.
When Seth Benardete turned back to Homer, 40 years after writing his dissertation on the Iliad, he found the pivotal moment of the Odyssey in Odysseus's rejection of immortality, which is somehow his destiny and his deliberate choice at once, and which expressed, in Benerdete's understanding, the core of what it is to be human. I'm going to read to you from the 5th book of the Odyssey, and I'll start with Odysseus's response to Calypso, a few lines in Greek, and then I'll read a few pages from Mandelbaum's translation to put these lines in context. Ten damame bomenos pros ephe polumetis Odysseus. Potna tea, me moi tode hoio, oida kai autos pantamal, hunakaseo perifron Penelopea, eidos akidnotere megatos des anta idestai. Hemen gar brotos esti, suda thanatos kai ageros. Ala kai hos, ethelo kai eldomai, ematapanta, oika tel temonai kai nostimon emar idestai. Eidautis raiasi teon, eni oinopi ponto. Tlesomai en stetesin echon talapentea tumon. Edegar mala pola paton, kai pola mogesa, kumasi kai polemo. Meta kai tode toisi genesto. Hos efat, eeleos dar edu, kai epi knefas ilten. Calypso, brightest goddess, seeing Hermes, did not have any doubts. The deathless gods can recognize each other, even when their dwelling places lie so far apart. Yet generous Odysseus was not there, but where he always sat along the shore, sighing and weeping, grieving, as he tore his heart and watched the restless sea. Calypso sat Hermes on a gleaming chair, then asked, "Hermes, my honored guest, a welcome one, what matter brings you here with your gold wand? You've hardly been a frequent visitor. Tell me the thoughts you want to share. If I can answer your request, and my heart finds it seemly, I shall help you willingly. But first, a time for friendship, courtesy." That said, the goddess showed him to a table heaped with ambrosia, and she poured red nectar. So Hermes ate and drank, and when his soul had been refreshed with food, this was his answer. "You ask, as goddess to a god, why I am here, and you do not want me to lie. Zeus ordered me to come against my will. Who'd want to cross an endless stretch of brine? Who'd want to find no mortal's town nearby where men, to please a god, may sacrifice choice hecatombs, roast thighs that so delight? And yet there is no god that can elude or slight the will of aegis-bearing Zeus. He says that there is a man with you, a man most miserable, one of those who fought 9 years